This is the first Fortnite video ever uploaded.
Yeah!
This is one of the greatest moments in Fortnite history. And this is what Fortnite looks like today. Nice! But how did we get here? Today, I'm going to be doing a detailed breakdown of the entire story of Fortnite. So let's go all the way back to the beginning of Fortnite Battle Royale. Ladies and gentlemen, grab your popcorn because we are starting on Saturday, December 10th of 2011. More specifically, at an event called the Video Game Awards. Here, Epic Games announced the creation of their newest game, Fortnite. And to give you an idea of how different things were back then, here's a small clip of the original trailer from that day, almost 13 years ago. The original trailer shows a completely different Fortnite from the one we have today. This version of Fortnite seems to be a horror survival game, sort of a mix of Call of Duty Zombies and Minecraft, both games being hugely popular at this time. The look of the game was, well, very different. It had a darker, grittier style, and there was no Spider-Man doing the gritty with Chun-Li. In 2012, Epic did a panel at the San Diego Comic-Con event where they announced a 2013 release date for the much-anticipated game. This, however, got pushed back again, and again, and again, until it was July 25th of 2017 when Fortnite finally entered its early access mode. This was now referred to as Fortnite Save the World. Fortnite Save the World mode was met with mixed reviews, and by 2018, the zombie survival drama was not something that gamers were looking for. Not to mention, you actually had to pay for this version of Fortnite, which is unlike the Battle Royale version, which would end up being free. Epic knew that Fortnite wasn't as successful as they would hoped it would be, so they decided to look into other ways to keep players interested and attract new players. That's when Epic launched a game mode that would not just change the alternate Epic Games world they created, but our entire world as we know it. And it was called Fortnite Battle Royale. On September 26th of 2017, Epic launched Fortnite Battle Royale. The concept was very simple, and still is to this day. 100 players enter an arena, and only one can leave. At least when you're playing solos, that is. They start on the battle bus and skydive onto the island. And once players are on the ground, they gather loot, build forts, and fight off enemies until they are the last one standing. All while players are running from the ever-shrinking storm. This concept was very similar to a game that had come out earlier that year called PUBG, a game where 100 players skydive onto an island, gather loot to fight off enemies until they're the last one standing, all while running from a storm. Sound familiar? Yeah. Well, PUBG's lawyers thought so. They actually tried to sue Epic Games, but the lawsuit was eventually dropped, probably because the concept of a battle royale wasn't exactly new. The point of all of this being that the concept of a battle royale was not original to PUBG or Fortnite, and Fortnite certainly would not be the last battle royale game made. Games like Apex Legends, Call of Duty Warzone, and many others quickly swept in to mooch off the genre and Fortnite's success. So with all this being said, why Fortnite? What made Fortnite of all these games more successful than the others? And what made Fortnite into the game that it is today? The short answer is updates. Fortnite is a game that's constantly changing and adding new content. The different eras of Fortnite are tracked using chapters and seasons. But when the game launched, there was none of this. This era, before all of the chapters in season, is referred to as the preseason era, or more commonly, Season 0. And this ran in between September and October of 2017. Back then, players didn't have any cosmetics available. Everyone was using default skins. In addition to this, some of the biggest creators in the world, like Ninja and many others, were just starting to play the game, but we'll talk more about those guys later. Also, a fun fact, in this pre-season, there was a weapon introduced into the game that was only in Fortnite for 30 minutes. It was called the Zappatron and has the record for the shortest stint an item has ever had in Fortnite. But forgetting all of that, Fortnite would eventually release Chapter 1, Season 1. Season 1, also called First Steps by Epic Games, was launched on October 26th of 2017. This new season introduced the item shop and season shop, which let players purchase cosmetics to customize their characters. Season 1 also had the first ever limited time event, or LTM for short. Here there was a 50v50 where players were split into 2 teams and then given 10 minutes to prepare for PvP. Epic would do this and many more things in the future to keep the game interesting and keep players engaged, which honestly is something really unique and one of the big answers to why Fortnite has outperformed a lot of other similar Battle Royale games. Now, like I said before, we can't talk about Fortnite without mentioning the content creators that rose to fame because of the game's popularity. Easily the most memorable content creator of this era is none other than Ninja. Tyler Blevins, also known as Ninja, joined the world of pro gaming all the way back in 2009 playing Halo 3. Yeah, he's really old, but he didn't start streaming games until 2011. And although he was relatively successful playing games like Halo 3 and PUBG, he didn't really blow up until the start of Fortnite. At the beginning of Fortnite, his followers grew from 500,000 to 2 million in just 6 months. But we're gonna get back to Ninja and many other creators later, cause it's time to talk about Season 2. This, in my opinion, is the most important season in Fortnite history. You see, Season 2 was the first ever Fortnite season with a theme to it, and that theme was medieval times. And more importantly than all of this, this was the first ever season with the Battle Pass. The introduction of a Battle Pass was very interesting because it gave players a reason to grind the game every single day. This was one of the biggest reasons Fortnite was able to have so many players consistently playing their game at the time. The Tier 100 skin in this season is one of my favorite skins of all time, the Black Knight. The Battle Pass wasn't the only huge addition of Fortnite in this season, however, and one of the largest updates not only in this season, but of all time, was the addition of Tilted Towers.
I've been wanting this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they
Tilted's abundance of loot and endless places to hide made it a common drop point for players. Additionally, in Season 2, we also saw the entrance of the Chug Jug. Easily one of the most impactful updates in gaming history, Season 2 of Fortnite would be really hard to follow up. But Epic Games and its developers still had a lot in store for Season 3. Season 3 is largely considered the start of Fortnite's story, or lore as some would call it. This is because a giant meteor appeared in the sky around the middle of the season. Smaller meteorites also crashed into places across the island, and new locations such as Guided Missile and Lucky Landing were introduced. Season 3 also introduced loading screens, weekly challenges, and contrails for players. Not to mention one of my favorite battle passes of all time, which was space-themed. Eventually, that giant meteor crashed into Dusty Depot, which destroyed it and turned it into Dusty Divot. Feel free to comment "RIP Dusty Depot" in the comments. I know you miss it as much as I do. Speaking of Dusty Depot exploding, this is what led us into the beginning of Season 4, called Brace for Impact. This season was incredibly popular. It included a superhero theme and the first ever major collaboration in form of the Infinity Gauntlet LTM. This was brought out to cross-promote the new Marvel movie, Avengers Infinity Wars, which was one of the biggest movies at its time. In this LTM, players fought over the Infinity Gauntlet mythic item, which would turn players into Thanos. And as expected, Thanos was a little bit OP. However, this was one of my favorite game modes, and I can just remember playing this with all my friends. The Infinity Gauntlet happened to be the first ever mythic item in the game as well, which would lead on to a bunch more crazy mythic items that we'll talk about in the future. Although this item was limited to the Infinity Gauntlet LTM at the time, this is not the last time we're gonna see an overpowered weapon. Trust me. During this time as well, another huge update to Fortnite actually came from the community instead of Epic Games himself, because it was at this time that the Fortnite community themselves started to crave some sort of esports aspect. The game was fun, everybody knew that, but just like any other game, people wanted to compete. Surprisingly, up until this point, there weren't any official tournaments run by Epic Games. However, as we'll see, there are so many Fortnite content creators who could fill this gap in the market. And just like that, Friday Fortnite was born. Popular and controversial content creator Keemstar started Friday Fortnite in May of 2018, and the event would run Friday of every week. Keem would bring on creators and pro gamers to fill the event. Even huge creators outside of the Fortnite community would come to play. Logan Paul and Mr. Beast were some of the YouTubers, just to name a couple. This was a massive turning point for Fortnite and its popularity. See, at this point, Fortnite was already one of the most popular games of its time, but it hadn't really reached the mainstream yet. With the introduction of creators like Mr. Beast into Friday Fortnite, however, Fortnite's popularity absolutely skyrockets at this time. With all of these new eyes on Fortnite, the Epic Games dev team wanted to shock the world. They wanted to do something that had never been done before. And that brings us to the end of Season 4. The finale of this season had the game's first official live event, and it was called the Blast-Off event. The event itself was started by a character named The Visitor, who arrived on the island through the meteor from previous seasons. He launches the rocket after programming it to travel through multiple dimensions, and the rocket almost destroys Tilted Towers, but luckily it was swallowed by a rift. But Tilted won't be safe forever, so stick around to see what happens. Well, anyway, after some more chaos, it finally launches into the sky and formed a sideways rift. This event would not only shock the Fortnite community, but gaming as a whole. This was the first time that such a large amount of players would all gather around together to watch an event, and many popular creators would even live stream the event to their audiences. Well, as you can see, the really impactful end of Season 4 left a giant cut or rift in the sky, which leads us right into Season 5, Worlds Collide. Because of the sideways rift in the sky, many of the old POIs were swapped with those from other dimensions. Moisty Mire was replaced with Paradise Palms and a desert. As changes kept happening across the map, the rift seemed to sort of widen. During this time, a lot of new cosmetics were added, including toys. So now you can throw balls back and forth with the boys, if you're into that. Well, anyway, this season also introduced one of the most important characters in Fortnite history, Kevin. You see, Kevin is amazing. He's big, he's tall, and he's a cube. A big purple cube. And sometimes he even moves. Oh, also, he created a giant floating island that hovers above the Fortnite map. And this was just the start of Kevin the Cube, because in Season 6, Darkness Rises, Kevin and his giant floating island caused the map to flood with corruption. Different corrupted areas began to appear across the map, and the island also moved around the map every single game. However, this cool addition wasn't appreciated by everybody. For the players in the competitive community, this was very controversial. Players who like to drop at the same spot on every map of every game were sometimes being griefed by the island being above their spots. Personally, however, I think this is one of my favorite seasons of all time because it was unpredictable and just really fun. Unfortunately, however, tragedy struck Fortnite because on November 4th of 2018, Kevin the Cube exploded. Everyone online during the live event was sent to the in-between, which was a bright white void connecting all of the alternate realities in the Fortnite universe. Once the players emerged, they were greeted with a whole new environment. Pieces of the floating island crumbled into the lake below, creating a beautiful environment with flowers and waterfalls. This was a very sharp contrast to the dark scenery of Leaky Lake just moments before. And this is now known as the Butterfly event, which launched players right into Season 7, You Better Watch Out. This season was winter themed because, it was winter. Anyways, Season 7 introduced weapon wraps to the cosmetics item shop, and also planes were added to the game. And this happened too. Yep, the Infinity Blade was placed atop a mountain at Polar Peak. For those of you that don't remember, only one of these overpowered Infinity Blades can exist on the map at any given time. Whenever a player picks up the Infinity Blade, they drop all their other inventory items, including their materials, guns, traps, heals, everything. Although this sounded like a huge disadvantage at first, that's until you hear the weapon stats. The Infinity Blade doubles the HP and shield health of the holder and passively generates the player's HP. If you eliminate someone with the blade, you immediately gain 50 HP, which was a precursor to the Siphon event, which we'll talk about later. Not only that, but the player moves 30% faster when holding the blade. The sword itself does 75 damage per hit, which roughly equates to 112.5 damage per second. Yeah, people hated this thing. It was so overpowered that it was vaulted only 3 days later. As exciting as the Infinity Blade was, that was not the most important update of Season 7. Remember before when I said that Season 2 was probably the most important update in gaming history at that point? Well, that's about to be blown away. Because in Season 7, we would have by far the most important update in not only Fortnite history, but probably in gaming history of all time. This is the season where Fortnite would introduce Creative Mode. Creative Mode allowed players to create their own islands, game modes, and anything else they could think up. The introduction of this Creative Mode increased the landscape of Fortnite forever. Because in addition to all the fun, creative maps you could build, this allowed for players to practice every single aspect of their game individually. From build battles, to edit courses, to aim trainers, and so much more, this blew Playground Mode out of the water. The skill gap between your everyday casual player and a player who grinded Creative Mode got wider and wider by the day. New building techniques, fighting styles, and edits were invented on a daily basis, and this led players to getting a lot better. Creative is a huge part of Fortnite to this day, and we'll talk about that more later, because first we need to talk about Season 8, also known as X Marks the Spot. Another one of my favorite seasons cosmetically, this season was pirate themed. It also brought animated sprays and moving emotes to the cosmetic catalog. This season was especially memorable because it had the first live event decided by the fans. This was unprecedented because players in video games had never really had a say on what we wanted, it was always just up to the devs. That's why when Epic released the Unvaulting event, it absolutely broke the internet. The Unvaulting event took place on May 4th of 2019. The vault on the map finally opened, emitting a giant white beam of light. Players who jumped in were thrown back into the 0 point, and inside the 0 point, players voted for an item to be unvaulted. For those of you that don't know, a vaulted item in video games, and more specifically in Fortnite, is something that used to be in the game's loot pool, but is no longer used in the active loot pool of the game. So Epic allowed players to unvault and bring back one of 6 items for the game. The players could choose from bouncers, the drum gun, grapplers, the Infinity Blade, no thank you, planes, and tactical submachine guns. Unsurprisingly, people voted almost unanimously for the very popular and sometimes overpowered drum gun. After the voting, players were relaunched back into the game only to find the volcano on the north side of the map erupting. The explosion destroyed popular POIs like Retail Row, Polar Peak, and most memorably, Tilted Towers. But we'll get back to the lore and story of Fortnite in a second, because as I said previously, the introduction of Creative Mode really started to increase the skill level of players. And around that same time, Epic had been running their first round of professional tournaments called Skirmishes. These in-person LAN events were the start of the very large popularity to come of competitive Fortnite. This also introduced some of the game's biggest creators to the spotlight. Players like Tfue, Cypher PK, Nick Mercs, Cloaksy, and Ninja, and many more all participated in these skirmish events. However, these tournaments would not compare to what is now known as the world's biggest esport event in history, the Fortnite World Cup. We're now in 2019, and Fortnite is incredibly mainstream, so it was time that Epic Games made a splash in the entire gaming community and world at large. Epic Games hosted the Fortnite World Cup at Arthur Ashe Stadium in New York City. The The tournament had an absolutely whopping $30 million prize pool, which is so hard to comprehend. That is so much money. And it was by far the largest prize pool that an esports tournament had ever seen. In order to qualify, players had to compete in online events taking place over 10 weeks between April and June of 2019. Each week alternated between solos and duos, and it separated gamers by geographical region, and the top scorers in each region from all around the world would proceed to the finals of the World Cup in New York City. Nearly 40 million players competed, and the tournament narrowed it down to only 200 players competing for the big prize. So, what's so interesting about this style of open qualifiers was that it allowed anybody to try and make it to the top. Previously, big esports like CSGO and Call of Duty were limited to players that were signed to large esports teams. But in this case, anyone could train with their friends and try their best to make it to New York City. Because of this, a majority of the players competing in the World Cup ended up being kids. In fact, the average age of a competitor in the Fortnite World Cup was 16, and the youngest players at the time were only 13 years old. As most of you already know, the big winner of the weekend was the solo champion, Bugha. Kyle Giersdorf, also known as Bugha, brought home an insane $3 million as a result of him winning the Fortnite tournament. The World Cup was one of the first gaming events on such a massive scale. Not only did millions of people watch online, but Fortnite sold out tickets IRL with almost 20,000 people in person to watch Bugha win. This was huge for the gaming world because this showed people, and mostly parents, that playing games could be more than just a hobby. Bugha was featured on talk shows and all other kinds of TV programs, including Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah, I want to be you so bad, dude. I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous of you right now.
And Fortnite was truly all over the world at this point because of it. Everybody knew who Fortnite was. People were posting wins on their Snapchat stories, and everybody wanted to be Bugha. We'll have more about the esports and competitive side of Fortnite later in the video, but for now, we need to talk about Season 9, also called The Future Is Yours. Before I talk about Season 9, however... So, Season 9, The Future Is Yours, was really strange because it introduced the Devourer. Apparently, he was trapped under Polar Peak and was woken up during the Unvaulting event. The Devourer was a really big, creepy-looking dude with one eye and way too many teeth. But after he woke up, he jumped into the sea, taking Polar Peak and its castle with it. Sometimes players could spot the monster swimming around in the water by spotting the castle peeking out above the surface. Eventually, the Devourer decided the sea wasn't a good enough home, and it began to attack coastal points of interest like Snobby Shores, Pleasant Park, and Loot Lake. His storyline culminated in the final showdown event on July 20th of 2019. Throughout the season, the Mecha Team leader was under construction, led by Singularity and the Imagined Order. After the mech was completed, a countdown to the final showdown event appeared. Once the countdown reached 0, the Devourer got out of the water and began to march across the island. After a long and valiant battle, the mecha came out on top, stabbing the Sword of Singularity right through the Devourer's head, ending its reign of terror over the Fortnite map. But the destruction caused by the battle will change the Fortnite island forever. The mecha had to tear the 0 point out of its containment, and eventually the inner core exploded, causing a reality wave across the island. This would launch us into the ever-important Fortnite season, Out of Time, also called Season X. After the explosion following the reality wave, the Scientist, a new character in Fortnite, arrived on the island and created 7 rift beacons across the map to invite the other members of the 7 into the loop. Each rift beacon location marked a change in POI. My favorite being the addition of Gotham City, where everyone is Batman. I love Batman. Once the Scientist was done building every rift, he built a rocket at Dusty Depot and set off a timer. This timer counted down to the end live event, which took place on October 13th, 2019. The rocket launch would set off a chain of events leading to the total destruction of Fortnite as we know it. An explosion so giant, it left the game literally unplayable. When players logged in on the following day, they were greeted with a giant black hole. The effects of the live event weren't only felt in-game. All the Fortnite social media accounts were blacked out during this event, and all that was left on their socials was a single post titled ... and a live stream of the Black Hole Live event. This event was one of the biggest gaming events in history. On YouTube, the game at one point reached 4.3 million concurrent viewers, and Twitch confirmed that 1.7 million concurrent viewers were watching the live event. The whole website of Twitch even crashed at one point because of how many people were watching the game go dark. So, this was the end of Fortnite. Or was it? You see, this was just the beginning. After 2 days of waiting, Fortnite came back online on October 15th of 2019, which marked the beginning of Fortnite Chapter 2. The black hole blew up, reshaping the previous island into a brand new one, the Apollo Island. Nearly everything was given a revamp on the island. New textures, improved graphics, and even the battle pass was built differently. They added cool water features as well, like swimming and boats. Season 1 of Chapter 2 was off to a great start, but then things started to slow down and nothing was changing. Chapter 2 Season 1, which was supposed to be a new spark to the game, became the longest season in Fortnite history. It lasted an entire 127 days, more than a third of a year. Players started to wonder if this new chapter system would just be like long seasons, and everyone was disappointed thinking that the updates would now happen very irregularly. Considering that this is the thing that made Fortnite unique, that would have been a really bad decision. However, this sadness didn't last too long because Season 2 of Chapter 2 finally came out on February 20th of 2020, right before the world was plunged into COVID lockdowns. This chapter centered on spies. The first AI bosses and henchmen were added, like Midas, TNT Tina, and even a collab with Deadpool. Each boss dropped a special mythic item that was even stronger than the legendary gold version of that item. Travis Scott, my favorite rapper, even had a concert in-game that season called Travis Scott's Astronomical. As much as I would love to show you some of the Travis Scott show, unfortunately, I don't want a copyright strike, so you'll have to watch that later when you're done watching this video. Anyways, Season 2 ended with the Device Live event. Midas was building a piece of technology all season, culminating in its activation. The Divide itself was meant to stop the storm from closing in on the island. For just a moment, the device seemed to have worked. The island is beautiful and serene with no storm, until the entire island is flooded. And next up, we've got Season 3 called Splashdown. Now, instead of running from the storm, players are running from a giant wall of water. Parts of the map are now completely flooded, but slowly drained throughout the season. Not to mention, everybody's favorite superhero, Aquaman, was added to the game. I'm kidding about him being everyone's favorite. Yeah, okay. Of course, this was just to promote the superhero movie coming out in 2018, Aquaman, which was 2 years old at that point, but whatever. Cars were also added to the game for the first time, and inside of the cars you could listen to music both from Fortnite and also real-life artists. This was a huge addition to the game, as this was the first time that really large mainstream artists had a huge interest in being inside video games. Also, Fortnite happened to sue Apple, yeah, like the iPhone, that Apple, yeah. Fortnite sued them during this season as well, and in retaliation, Apple didn't allow Epic Games to continue operating on the App Store, so this essentially ended Fortnite Mobile. Anyways, once the island was successfully drained, Thor, yeah, like Chris Hemsworth Thor, returns to the Fortnite Island and brings all of his friends with him. This started Fortnite Chapter 2 Season 4, The Nexus War. This was their first official themed crossover season. The Battle Pass was Marvel themed, and the map was Marvel themed as well. The bosses were Marvel themed, they were Marvel theme exclusive LTMs. If they could slap a Marvel character on something, they did it. Instead of dropping mythic guns, this season the bosses dropped superpowers. The big bad scary boss of this season is Galacticus, a big red dude from the Fantastic Four comics. And during the live event, he threatened to eat the 0 point. Yeah, not sure why he was doing that, but instead of eating the 0 point, Tony Stark, Iron Man, feeds him a bunch of battle buses, and then boom, crisis averted. Nobody was eaten. Nice. On to the next season. Cool. Next is Fortnite Chapter 2, Season 5, also known as 0 Point. Even though us Fortniters won the battle against Galacticus, the 0 Point was left unstable. A bunch of hunters were pulled into the island to help, like Mando from The Mandalorian. There were a lot of other memorable collaborations this season, with the fan-favorite collab being Ryu and Chun-Li from Street Fighter. Let's be real, Chun-Li got most of the attention, especially from Cypher PK. Exotic items also entered the game for the first time ever. The 0 Point on the brink of exploding once again had to be saved. And luckily, Jonesy, also my profile picture, comes in right at the perfect time to save it, teaming up with the 7. But in turn, he locks himself into the loop, which sends the island back into a primal state. And that's where we have Chapter 2, Season 6, Primal. Honestly, I am not going to talk a lot about this season. I do not like the Primal season at all. However, we do have to talk about it just a little bit to make sure that the story all makes sense. Basically, a big old primal biome appeared in the middle of the map, the final blast from the 0 Point removed the sand from the deserts, destroyed any tech left on the island, and it created this thing called the Spire. Anyways, the season also added a bunch of new weapon types like makeshift weapons, which I hate, and primal weapons, which I also hate. Plus, this is the first time people get to do weapon crafting in-game, and honestly, I won't be too mean about that because it's pretty cool. But many players, like me, were not a fan of these weapons when they were introduced. Luckily, however, this was all about to change in Chapter 2, Season 7, Invasion. All of the weird Spire business attracted aliens to the island where they invaded, hence the name of the season, Invasion. Now, there's this giant alien mothership constantly hovering over the island. Aliens kept abducting different POIs from around the map. Players can take the UFOs over and attack other players from the sky. You could either abduct people or simply shoot at them with giant cannons. Either way, if you got a hand on one of these UFOs, you were guaranteed to be an absolute menace in-game. Also in this alien season, we got to see Rick Sanchez from Rick and Morty, and everyone's favorite alien superhero, Superman. The season ended with a huge mission where you invade the alien mothership in the Skyfire event. And then once you invade the ship, you not only find aliens, but Kevin!
Yes! 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 Yes!
Yep, he is not dead. He is just right here on some spaceship. No worries. The mothership explodes, launching a ton of cubes, little baby Kevins, onto the island like crazy, which bring us right into Chapter 2, Season 8, called Cubed. Yep, he's back. I told you Kevin would be back. Not only did he get the island covered in purple cubes, but there was also blue cubes and gold ones as well. There were also cube monsters, which were weird rock-like creatures, and unlike previous seasons during Chapter 2, the Battle Pass only had one skin from a different franchise, this being Carnage. At this point, a lot of players were getting very tired of the Apollo Island, and people have been playing this Chapter 2 map for over 2 years now. They were ready for a change, and luckily, Epic had everyone covered with the end of Chapter 2 event. What happens is the cubes all converge into the middle of the map and form this giant, pyramid thing called Convergence. The Cube Queen, who is the queen of the cubes, if you haven't guessed that by the name, opens up a portal with the pyramid. This causes a bunch of aliens to come pouring out of the sky. But don't worry, The Rock is here to save everyone. Yeah, Dwayne, that Rock, yep. Okay, in order to stop the Queen, The Rock flips the entire island over, destroying her once and for all. And this begins a whole new chapter in Fortnite, Chapter 3. On December 5th, 2021, Fortnite Chapter 3 Season 1, called Flipped, launches. It puts players on a whole new island named Artemis. This is the season where the new mechanic of sliding was finally added into the game, now letting players slide down cliff sides as fast as they want. Not to mention, that's right, Spider-Man is finally coming to Fortnite, and he took the Daily Bugle and his web slingers along with him to the island. Season 1 of Chapter 3 was one of my personal favorites because I'm a huge Spider-Man fan, but I didn't like it as much as Chapter 3 Season 2. The battle between the Seven and the Imagined Order had come to a new head, and the Imagined Order invaded the island. This attack leads us right into the new season. Chapter 3 Season 2, Resistance, added more movement to the game. Specifically, you can now sprint and mantle over walls and other various objects. You can also burst through doors. Epic also added this new overshield thing, which added 50 extra armor points that regenerate between battles, but this was only in the Zero Builds game mode. Yep, you heard that right, the Zero Builds game mode. We're going to talk about that in just a second, because the IO has invaded the map in Chapter 3 Season 2. See, multiple POIs now include IO blimps and technology that the players can use to their advantage, like siege cannons and tanks. But the invasion wasn't all fun and explosions. The IO also managed to block building entirely. Yeah, completely. I don't know if you guys remember this, but for the first few weeks of the season, players were not able to build at all in any game mode. For the first time ever in Fortnite, building was gone. This also marked the launch of Fortnite's Zero Build mode, which brought a whole new type of player to the game. Perhaps one of the best parts of this happening was that a lot of old content creators who weren't a fan of Fortnite at that time came back to the game to try out the Zero Build mode. Players like Tfue and Zemi, just to name a couple. Honestly, I'm a huge fan of the Zero Builds mode because I think it adds diversity to the game. Personally, I'll always be a fan of builds, and that's what I play mostly, but I don't think there's anything wrong with Epic adding in multiple game modes because it can only attract more players. Comment down below, though, what you guys prefer, Zero Builds or regular builds. Well, anyway, let's move on to Chapter 3, Season 3. Now that the IO is defeated, the loopers can sit back and just relax. And Season 3 of Chapter 3 was called Vibin', which allowed them to do that. There was a ton of new locations like Rave Cave and a big amusement park with a giant roller coaster. You could also tame and ride wolves this season, which was pretty fun. In addition to that, one of the most anticipated crossovers of all time happened when this season included Dragon Ball Z in Fortnite. People were so excited about this that its announcement became Epic's most liked tweet ever in just 24 hours. Once it was released, people were kamehameha'ing all over the map.
Ah! Ah! Oh, shoot! Oh, shoot!
However, while everyone was distracted by Dragon Balls and roller coasters, the new big bad evil known as the Herald was watching from afar, waiting to launch her plan. And that happened in Chapter 3, Season 4, called Paradise, and the island is now being slowly taken over by a substance called Chrome. It turns everything super shiny and gives players that are covered in it special powers. It gives you healing, becoming immune to certain fire, phasing through walls, and also turning into a blob. You guys remember blobbing around the map? I loved it. I don't know about you, but I enjoyed it. Also, one of the most important additions ever was made to the season, that you can now pet that dog. Regardless, throughout the season, the map slowly but surely was taken over by the Chrome, all leading up to Chapter 3's final event called the Fracture. Despite the island's best efforts, the Herald is able to fuse with the Reality Tree, destroying both the Artemis and Apollo islands. Players had to collect fragments of the Zero Point, ultimately creating an entire new island, Asteria. And that's what leads us into Chapter 4. Chapter 4, Season 1, A New Beginning, started off with a whole new map filled with all different POIs. Plus, Spawn Island is now in space. To support this beautiful new island came Unreal Engine 5. For those of you that don't know, Unreal Engine is how Epic Games creates Fortnite, and this was on a full new version of it, so the lighting and everything else about the game was greatly improved. This improved the way that the lighting, the sky, and the clouds looked, and even how walls break in the game. If you wanted to travel the island in style, Epic also added a dirt bike during Season 1 of Chapter 4, and it earned you some XP if you did cool tricks. A new weapon was also added to the game called the Excalibur rifle, which literally shoots swords. And if that doesn't sound threatening enough, those swords also explode on your enemies.
I love this gun.
Perhaps one of the biggest changes, however, came in the form of a new perks system. As the match progressed, players are able to choose different perks, also known as augments, to help them throughout the match. This season's island was led by a group called the Oathbound, and members of the group were tasked with building a giant rift gate. As the season continues, the gate slowly was built up, and then like most things in the game, it exploded. The explosion brought the new season, Chapter 2, Season 4, called Mega. This season had a new Tokyo vibe to it. The rift exploding brought a whole new POI known as Mega City. This is not only one of the biggest POIs in Fortnite history, it also reminded a lot of people of Tilted Towers. Before this season came out, a ton of leakers were predicting a new first-person mode being added to the game. However, that never ended up happening. Even as of the making of this video a year later, Fortnite still has not introduced or announced anything about a potential first-person mode, even though the leakers continue to say that it might happen. Even though this new season added a lot of mobility changes, the most important difference happened outside of the game. On May 15th, 2023, Fortnite removed Arena mode forever, changing the game's meta completely. They quickly replaced Arena, however, with a new mode simply called Ranked. With the new mode came an entirely different point systems, different rankings, and even different loot pools. The biggest change, however, to the meta came in the form of Epic removing Siphon.
No! No! No!
Players no longer get HP back after they eliminate somebody. And it's safe to say, people were pretty upset about this. And just a few months later, Fortnite added Siphon back for tournament use, but it did not return to public and ranked matches. And eventually they even removed Siphon from tournament modes as well. Throughout the season, rumbles could be felt in a different area around the map. As the time went on, these rumblings intensified and a huge crack appeared on the island. Eventually, the terrain on Asteria crumbled and the center of the island collapsed, revealing a huge abandoned jungle just under the surface. Which leads us into Fortnite Chapter 4, Season 3, Wilds. This threw players into a whole new leafy terrain. There were vines you could slide on like grind rails from the season before. They also added mud on the ground where if you slide through it, you go super fast and also heal. Not to mention, in this season, you could ride on dinosaurs. There wasn't really anything that eventful, however, and Season 3 quickly turned into Season 4, which was known as the Last Resort. In this season, the sun is eclipsed by the moon, and the island is infiltrated by time-traveling vampire Kato Thorn. 3 huge new POIs were added, and the Shieldbreaker EMPs make their first ever appearance in this season. There was also a collab with Star Wars this season, giving us the Ahsoka Tano skin in anticipation of their new series on Disney+. Despite all the new changes of Chapter 4, a lot of players were getting tired of Fortnite. The game was becoming repetitive, and the story seemed to have taken a backseat to just big collaborations. Each season used to end with a huge live event with players rallying together to create a sense of excitement and community. Now, we're lucky if they even have a live event at the end of the chapter. See, Fortnite needed a change, and fast. If Epic wanted to keep their players in the game, they needed to do something drastic. And that's exactly where they came up with the best idea in Fortnite history, Fortnite OG. You see, this update was not part of the chapter or season system, it was completely alone. And Fortnite OG is exactly what it sounds like. This update brought back the original Fortnite map and everything that came with it. The POIs like Tilted Towers and everything else that you loved, as well as the loot, and more importantly than all of this, it brought back the nostalgia. Players that hadn't gotten on the game, including some of my friends, were back to play and it felt amazing. According to the Fortnite social media account, nearly 45 million players joined the game on its release weekend. People loved this update, but unfortunately, all things must come to an end, and this was a relatively quick season. The Fortnite OG season only lasted 1 month. The OG season ended on December 2nd of 2023, and just a couple days after that, Fortnite released LEGO Fortnite. This was basically a whole new game mode, but launched inside of the Fortnite launcher. However, on launch day, many players were comparing it to Minecraft, but instead of blocks, it's Legos. And honestly, that seems like a pretty accurate description of what the game is. Pretty much all of our skins in Fortnite could also be used in their LEGO versions, and way more skins were compatible than anyone ever imagined. Over 1,200 LEGO skins were available on game launch day. In the game, just like Minecraft, you can collect resources, build things, eat food, and if you expect something out of a survival game, chances are LEGO Fortnite has you covered. But Epic Games didn't just stop there. On December 8th, they released Rocket Racing. This was Fortnite's take on a classic arcade racing game, and they even did a collaboration with another Epic Games game called Rocket League. Additionally, this game mode, which came out on December 8th, The Fortnite Festival, which is very similar to Rock Band, also came out on December 9th. On launch day, there were plenty of featured songs by Fall Out Boy, Machine Gun Kelly, Weezer, and many more huge artists. And most importantly, this event that they held to launch off Fortnite Festival was headlined by The Weeknd, and then Moneymaker sang that song.
With the popular, how you just with the popular.
However, it's time we get back to the regular Fortnite game, and now we're in Chapter 5. Fortnite OG ended with an event called the Big Bang. During this event, a huge rocket is launched into the sky from Dusty Divot, and that rocket launches us right in to Chapter 5, Season 1. The event played out very similarly to the live event in Season X, but instead of being sucked into a black hole of nothing, it results in the aforementioned Big Bang. The huge explosion creates new worlds, and in the blast, players are shown Lego Fortnite and rocket racing for the very first time, and then the event ends on the Fortnite Festival right in the middle of an Eminem concert that happens to be interrupted by a gigantic Eminem, like the rapper, not the candy. The actual season started on December 3rd of 2023. This season brought a whole new island named Helios. The island had 5 bosses scattered around the map, the most important of which was Peter Griffin. When you beat the bosses, they drop medallions, and each medallion gives the player passive healing for the rest of the game. This season also introduced weapon modding, so you can now switch out scopes, mags, barrels, and underbarrels to improve and customize your gun the way that you like it. As far as new items, the dreaded ballistic shield was added to the game, and this thing was super OP, especially in zero builds mode. The shield comes with an automatic pistol that could just melt enemies from close up, and you're just hiding behind in your comfy little shield hiding spot. Grapple blades were also added into the game that were used as a melee weapon, but more importantly used as a mode of transportation. Just as players were starting to enjoy Chapter 5, Season 2 made its way into the game. Towards the end of Season 1, there was a series of earthquakes eventually culminating in a giant molten lava hand emerging from the ground holding a giant chest. Over the course of a day, players kept shooting the chains holding the chest, and eventually the chains broke and finally revealed the contents of what was in the chest. The contents were thousands of helpless souls that shot up into the sky in a giant beam of light. These souls were evil and kept in that box for a reason. Now the ancient Greek pantheon has arrived on the island. Angry that the players opened the box, Zeus, the king of all gods, vows to destroy all mortal beings for being dumb. The gods brought a ton of fine items in the game with them, like wings of Icarus and Zeus's thunderbolt. Plus, this new season brought along the long-awaited Avatar collaboration, the animated series, not the Blue Dude movie, and also a fan-favorite character, Midas, who now had all new Greek-themed skin. Well, that brings us to today. Well, at least kind of. I finished this video a couple weeks ago, probably, and now we're even further. Who really knows? But long story short, we are quickly approaching 7 whole years of Fortnite. Love it or hate it, the game has cemented itself as probably the biggest video game in history. No other game of the last 10 years could possibly be anywhere near Fortnite's scale. They're constantly releasing new content, whether that be new seasons or whole new game modes entirely. And that answers the question of why. And although the game has gone through some ups and downs, I think it's very obvious that Fortnite is here to stay. Thank you guys so much, and if you watched this very long video to the end, I really appreciate you. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and comment down below what videos you guys want to see next. I love you, and I'll see you in the next one.